the myth was born. The motorcycle world had its Jesus moments from now on. There's a before Gixxer 750 and there's an after Gixxer 750. It's 1984. Turbos everywhere. Ray-Bans, mandatory safety equipment. Ladies shook what their mamas gave them, not what the doctors gave them.
What the hell is even that?
Back in the early 80s, race bikes looked like this. And this. The raciest, most hardcore production bike, however, what you and I can buy, looked like this. Do you see the problem? Race replicas didn't exist. Today I can walk into a Ducati dealership and debt myself over 5 generations and leave with something like this, a V4R. This is identical in base to what Alvaro Bautista took to victory last year in World Superbike, and maybe a few seconds slower a lap than the MotoGP machine. Mind-blowing. But this is a recent phenomenon. Back in 1984, the raciest you could buy were things we call today Tourers. Alright, fine, sport tourers if you want them to feel good about themselves. But one day in 1984, after too much nose candy, it was the 80s after all, Suzuki decides, you know what, F that. We will make the first mass-produced race replica ever. Suzuki was known for 2 things, 2-stroke masterism and conservatism. Coke-induced rash decisions were, as you can see, not one of them. Market studies, higher-ups, everyone was telling them, guys, the people are not ready for a race bike for the road. This is a terrible idea. But a few visionaries within the company believed so hard in the idea they were willing to bet it all on black. First, they needed a base. They get a 1983 GSX-750 from the production line. What they do is simple. They dismantle literally all of it. Then piece by piece, they are instructed to color them either blue or red. Bits that had no issues in blue, and bits that were known to have reliability issues in red. What they found from this study is that basically the entire bike came back blue. The bikes were simply too reliable. Now you'd be thinking, Al, why are you saying this like it's a bad thing, you idiot? And you'd be right. It's not a bad thing. Harleys leaked. Ducatis blew up. Honda had its V4s have catastrophic camshaft failures. Suzuki had made a point of being one of the most reliable bikes out there. The downside is reliability isn't free. It's heavy. It's a chunky boy. So the engineering challenge to the team was redesigning parts so that they're as light as possible while still retaining the required reliability. Weight has entered the chat, ladies and gents. Back then, not a single customer cared about weight. They cared about 2 things: horsepower and top speed. Anything else was secondary. But that was to be turned upside down. Then there was the issue of power. Back then, Japan and some other parts of the world had an asinine 100 horsepower limit because politicians are morons.
That is a disgrace.
But no matter, it was a lot back then what 200 horsepower is for us today. Open classes of the day were capable of making that kind of horsepowerage, but getting it out of a 750cc was going to need some engineering breakthroughs. The recipe for big horsepower is simple: big bore, big aggressive overlapping camshaft, high compression, advanced timing, and cram in as much air as you possibly can. This is no secret to any engineer. The problem is, and has always been, heat. A lot of heat. Heat causes knock, pre-ignition, hotspots. Engines back then were predominantly air-cooled, very low performance cooling system. Case in point, they managed to squeeze 97 horsepower out of it, but very, very unreliably. I mean, spark plugs would break, cylinder sleeves would come loose, valves would kink. In effect, the engine was literally melting. What would have been ideal is water cooling, something they weren't unfamiliar with thanks to the iconic GT750 from 1971. The problem is that it adds a lot of weight, and Suzuki didn't feel it had the block casting capabilities yet for such complexity. So what they settled on was the genius work star engineer Estuo Yokouchi had done on the MAD XN85, an air-cooled turbo bike. It was the 80s after all. The design that managed to keep that monster cool somehow relied on using the oil that was otherwise just going to chill in the sump and have it spray under the pistons, as well as travel all the way to the top end to cool it through specific channels. This hybrid air and oil cooling system was called SAX, and it was just what they needed. It gave the team the cooling headspace to smash through that 100 horsepower target without the engine turning into a Cornetto on a sunny day. Just to top it all off, Suzuki flexed with an aluminium frame. Once they worked their magic, the GSX-R 750 was 176 kilos while making 100 horsepower, the lightest 750 ever. You know you're on a race bike when the dash is on foam and the rev counter doesn't even bother working if you're under 3000 RPM. Cologne, 1985. It's go time. The Suzuki boffins are presenting the GSX-R 750 to the world with a little sweat bead going down their faces like, this thing better sell. Konnichiwa! I'll give it to you straight, they killed it. The power, the weight, the low clip-ons and aggressive racing position, something till then unseen, all with Suzuki reliability and all this race-bred technology for an affordable price. The competitors were like, damn Suzuki, did you have to go for the kill? The dominating GS1000R endurance racer looks got people intrigued, and the spec sheet got them hooked. The GSX 750 excited people like nothing before. It was at this point that the biking world was forever changed. The myth was born. The motorcycle world had its Jesus moments from now on. There's a before GSX 750 and there's an after GSX 750. The FZ 750 Yamaha released that same year to give it some shade had as much success as my YouTube channel. It had liquid cooling and a novel 5-valve design, but its girl next door looks and 37 kilos heavier weight made sure all the attention was on the hot, skinny supermodel. With a smash hit like the slab side, how'd you even follow up? Well, the 1988 GSX 750 nicknamed Slingshot aimed for softening the initial design at the worst time. The competition was rushing to one-up the recipe, Yamaha OW01, Honda RC30, and the ZX-R 750 showing those two how it's done without being a priceless exotic special. We're wearing 17-inch radials now instead of the 18-inch on the slab side, making it more user-friendly. In 1992, we annoyingly pick up more weight again through finally getting water cooling and some heavy but real sexy upside-down forks. Back then, the hot new thing. But in 1992, another thing was happening. The Fireblade. Honda was finally making waves by using the exact same formula the original slab side used. Maximum weight loss. But it's not until 1996 that Suzuki manages to wow the public again like the original did. What burst onto the scene was the GSX-R 750 S-Rad. This is one of those magical engineering moments where everything just came together. The water cooling system was perfected and therefore power was able to be squeezed out of the engine with minimal weight penalty. It made almost as much as the Fireblade while being 169 cc smaller. Mental! Faster, more powerful computers allowed Suzuki to design everything down to the gram and strength needed, nothing more. The frame was finally a twin spar design instead of a cradle, giving race bike rigidity while allowing the bike to weigh only 179 kilos. The look isn't to my liking with that hornet-shaped back, but it found legions of fans everywhere, especially when the RGV 500 race bike picked up that look. As if none of that was enough, in 1998 the S-Rad gains fuel injection, but with no gain in power. That came with the 2000 model where everything on the S-Rad was turned up to 11. The looks have that subtle aggressiveness, like, look at me with my big, endearing headlights, but I will kill you. 145 horseponies, well in excess of what the 1100cc open classes could even dream of in 1986. All this while not weighing much more than a bicycle. I checked. Unfortunately, in 2000, the 750cc class was old news. World Superbike was switching to 1000cc, and so did MotoGP for that matter. So Suzuki thought, okay, why don't we take our class-leading, light as a feather GSX-R 750 and literally just put a 1000cc engine in that bitch? What could possibly go wrong? What could go wrong was the now GSX-R 1000 made the competition look so bad at its release, it was almost unfair. 170 kilos weight for 160 horsepower from only 988cc, not even the full 1000, such a flex. Simply a class above the rest. The R1 was still on carbies and lacked the mid-range stomp of the K1. The 929 Fireblade was the nice guy every woman friend zones. And the ZX-9R still had a reserve tab, for God's sake. I'm being harsh, all those bikes were amazing, but in isolation. Put them next to the Gixxer Thou, and your perspective changes. The only thing that sucked was the 6-spot calipers, which was simply not good enough for the stomping power of that engine. Nothing could stop a Gixxer 1000. Not even its brakes. The next magical engineering moment was with the legendary K5 Gixxer 1000. Frames were so dainty, too dainty in fact, as some areas were so thin they were prone to cracks. The engine was once again a class-leading 178 horsepower fire-breathing monster, and the lack of stringent emissions and noise controls meant this was the last engine where Suzuki engineers still had the upper hand. not Suzuki lawyers. If you needed any proof of how potent the K5 was, this industry's national treasure, Arian Zak, managed to lap a K5 an entire second faster than the brand new Panigale. How much that was down to settings, the nature of the track, etc., I don't know. But anything even close to 3 seconds of the Panigale is nothing short of remarkable. This was arguably the peak of the GSX-R lineage. This was the Gixxer's Michael Jackson Thriller moment. It's Al Pacino Scarface moments. It's 1942 Hitler. For all the wrong reasons. What came afterward were 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards, small evolutions. Weight picked up again with the idiotic twin exhaust trend to calm down noise and cram in more catalytic converters. This lack of revolution would have been fine before, but they were in vicious company now. In 2009, the S1000RR came out after having used the K5 Gixxer as its base. The BMWs and Ducatis of the time were swinging at the gate with electronics that was starting to be capable of convincing even the most staunch "my traction control is my hand." All of a sudden, the analog, all about feel Gixxer became outdated, with Suzuki's refusal to put any serious electronics in its bikes, all the way to 2017 when the L7 Gixxer 1000 came out. A bike with finally all the bells and whistles and looks to die for in my view, but far, far, far too late. The L7 would have set the planet on fire if it came 7 years earlier. But that's alright, we're on track to get it on fire anyway. It made 199 horsepower with VVT straight from its MotoGP machine. It used the centrifugal force of the cam rotating to push balls radially, and therefore change the timing. Very trick stuff, all mechanical. Amazing. It's no shift cam or VTEC since you're not changing the cam lobe's profile, but it still made it go through emissions and boost mid-range. At 199 horsepower, it's 17 horsepower up on the previous model. A ton when you consider they were already squeezing every drop out of 1000cc. The L7 Gen won numerous shootouts and I'm sure sold in very decent numbers, but the lack of serious updates for 5 years since its release should have been a sign. Suzuki didn't want to bother making the engine Euro 5 compliant, so they simply dropped the GSX-R range. 600, 750 and now 1000. And since they're not selling a superbike anymore, they just stopped racing MotoGP as well. This makes me real sad because the brand that started it all basically lost its love for the superbike, preferring to divert resources into the electrification of its car range. Another reason to dislike cages, you ruin everything. The only slight glimmer of hope is they did these shenanigans before, you know, killing the Hayabusa before bringing it back. But it's clear they don't want to spend capital on cutting-edge bikes anymore. And I almost don't blame them. The car business is way more lucrative and constantly growing. But I can't help but think what could have been. They certainly have the capabilities to put a shift cam type of system or the centrifugal system on both cams to make it pass emissions, but they didn't even bother. And that stings a little bit. In short, thank you, Suzuki. Honestly, thank you for the Gixxer. After 38 years, the king is dead. Long live the king, and buy K1 Gixxer, but not before I've done it. I want to take this opportunity to ask you to join me on my Discord. It's very important for where I want to take this community. Thank you for your support.